All right, welcome to Computer Science 30S. This is lesson number 9. We're going to look at different types of variables and what we call the scope of variables. So we've seen a lot of different types of variables. We've seen normal and global variables. These variables are made in the regular menu and can be used anywhere. The variable score below is an example. These can be used by any sprite in any block or in any script because they are created in the main script area. So they are what we call a global variable. Everybody can see them and use them. There are sprite-specific variables. When you create a normal or global variable, you can select that the variable is for this sprite only. Then these variables will show up as variables listed below the line in the Variables tab. You can see this little line down here. We recommend not using these variables in blocks. They can be dangerous. You may not realize that that variable is being used, or you may not know that it's being changed, edited. But it's possible to have a score that's only for a certain variable, or for a certain sprite. Okay, there's also what we call arguments to a function, a variable set by the person calling the function. We can refer to this as an input. This can only be used within the block editor. Here's an example here of a block that we've created called draw square, and we're using the variable size. In other words, size only exists inside the block. Size outside in the main script area means nothing. Any number or variable can be sent to the block, but the value that will be used, that value will be used as size in the block. So it doesn't matter what variable you call it in the main program. When you call draw square, that variable that you send, the argument to the function, to the block, will be referred to as size within the block. There's also script variables. The script variable block gives us a variable that we can use inside of the script. You may need a couple variables just inside your block to manipulate things. These can only be used in that particular script. The script could be a block script shown below, or it could be regular. Much like arguments, these exist only inside the block. However, they are not inputs to the block. They are created by the programmer inside the block itself. They can, though, be used to return a value to the calling script. As in an example here, we would have the report down at the bottom here, and we would report bigger value back to, and it would return the value, the bigger value, to the function, to the main script that called this block the max of x and y. There can be conflicts between regular variables and block variables. We'd like to point out that something about accessing regular variables when we are in the block editor. In the current situation, we have the regular variables x, y, and z shown below. These were created in the main script area. And we've also made a block that takes arguments named x and y. When we use a set block, we click on the drop-down menu to see what variables are available to us. Notice that the first variable shown is z. First one here is z, and there's a little line. This is the regular variable z. Then below the line are the variables x and y. We've made the input names the same. Here we made the input names the same, the x and the y, as the regular variables x and y, so we can no longer access those regular variables. So this x and this y in this block, this drop-down menu, refer to the inputs x and y. They do not refer to these x and y's that were created in the main block. So you have to be careful. That's why the little line is there to sort of help you keep things separate. Now, if we add another block variable called z in our block editor, if we could put in a script variable here, z, you'll see that the regular z one has disappeared. It's no longer global. This block cannot see it, and this z refers to the block scope variable z. All this concept refers to the scope of the variable. What blocks, what functions, what codes can actually see that variable. That refers to the scope of a variable. Two ways to think about why it works this way. The block variables is that they block access to regular variables with the same name. And when we use a variable named x inside the block editor, Scratch has to figure out which variable we are referring to. It starts by looking at the block variables. If there's one there, it assumes that you mean that variable. If there's no variable in the block that has that name, it assumes you mean the regular one, which was a global variable. Be aware of this when naming variables. Be careful. Try to use more generic names in blocks so that they can be used in any program, and your main script should have a more descriptive variable name. Okay, so here's an assignment for you. I'd like you to simplify a tic-tac-toe board drawing routine using functions. In 20S, we used a repeat block to avoid duplicating code. And you probably remember the nesting triangles assignment. So similarly, we can use a function or a block to avoid duplicating code. On the next page is some code to draw the tic-tac-toe board. Your goal is to create functions, create blocks that make this code simpler. One important thing is to keep in mind is to give your new functions really intuitive names so that it's easy to read the code and to understand what it means. So here's the main code. Should be on the sheet that you have as well. I'd like you to rewrite this entire thing using new created blocks that you've created and repeat them, call them more than once here. And I'd like you to notice how difficult it is to read this code. You have to figure out what this is doing because there are no comments. So a little bit of a return to you. When I have to mark your programs, you'll notice that I insist on comments and so that it's easier to figure out what's going on. This is the type of thing that I have to deal with. So good luck with that. And that is all for lesson number 9.